Disclaimer: the hosts of this podcast, Timothy Patrick and Will Foley, are by no means medical professionals. However, having lived experience with mental illness themselves, they have gained useful perspectives on common mental health issues that some of us struggle to overcome on a daily basis. By sharing their stories, they hope to create connection. By creating connection, they hope to help you find your purpose. And through purpose, we can all begin to build the foundation for positive mental health. This is Above Ground Podcast.
Are you ready to lace up your boots, throw up your horns, and jump into the pit? Then let's stomp the stigmas of mental illness. It's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now, Will Foley and Timothy Patrick.
What is up, everyone? It's time for another Above Ground Podcast episode. That's right. You're talking Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. I think I'm going to start introducing the dates every time I do these just to make sure you know where you're at. Because sometimes when we're in the throes of anxiety, we can forget just the most basic of things. And we're going to talk about anxiety today on today's episode because we are joined by the Anxiety MD, Dr. Russell Kennedy is our guest this week, and it was an awesome experience to speak with him, and I know you're going to gain some great insight and benefit out of this episode. Another benefit of this awesome podcast is the fact that we have some cool people that we know, like young Dan and Natalie of Close Knit Company out of Naples, Florida. That's right. Close Knit Company is an awesome screen printing company that started here humbly in 2016 here in upstate New York, man. But they got out of this snowy land and they went to where their dreams were in Naples, Florida. Young Dan creates some awesome screen printed tees. Natalie takes some great pictures, and together, man, they're a force to be reckoned with, and we are happy to have them as teammates here at Above Ground Podcast because they are the official screen printing company for our gear. We have a t-shirt and a hoodie available at closeknitcompany.com, and you can find that. And if you buy a t-shirt, it all helps us keep this show going, man. That's what it's all about. And you also get to help a small business keep adding to its t-shirt designs because they make some cool ass t-shirts, man. They really do. They got some St. Patrick's Day designs right now. Don't forget, magically delicious. So if you go to closeknitco.com and you go to CollabX, underneath their collections, you can find our stuff or you can find many of their designs, man. They got some cool stuff. So please check out closeknitco.com. Tell them that Above Ground Podcast sent you. Now it's time for the anxiety prescription with Russell Kennedy, MD, the Anxiety MD.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to yet another Above Ground Podcast. Above Ground Podcast because you can't serve below. Are you down with TPP?
Yeah, you know me.
Timmy, come on, man. You're letting me down, dude.
All right, hold on. Let me try that again. Yeah, you know me.
What's up, better. Timmy? How we doing this week, brother?
We're doing, man. We're doing.
Yeah.
One day at a time.
Dude, that's all you can do. That's all you can do. That's all the world should ask of you is one day at a time, man. Shit. Maybe sometimes 1 hour at a time might be a better scope and view. So we are on Zoom again, which means we have another above ground conversation going on. And tonight we are joined by, not only are we joined by a medical doctor, he is a neuroscientist. He's an author. He is a stand-up comedian, which is pretty fucking cool. And he's also a yoga meditation teacher, and I got to say, an all-around Renaissance man. Dr. Russ Kennedy, thank you so much for being here, man.
I do my best.
Thank you.
Dr. Russ is known as the Anxiety MD. He wrote a book that came out in 2020 called The Anxiety Prescription. And it's so awesome to have you here. So tell us about your work. I love the idea that helping people recover from anxiety is your life's work. And the people that can, and there's no better guides than the ones who have been in the maze themselves and show the way out. Because that's why we started Above Ground Podcast, was because we've had our own experiences and we wanted to help people, man. So Dr. Russ, it's a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I saw some of your work and I saw that you have a sense of humor. So it's like, I got to work with these guys. You know, it's kind of stiff, you know, when you deal with trauma, and especially childhood trauma, it can get pretty thick, you know, and it can get pretty dull, you know, and pretty intense, probably. Intense is probably the better word. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family with, my dad was schizophrenic and bipolar, so there was a lot of chaos in my family. So I grew up trying to help people, so I decided I'll become a medical doctor, so I did that. Wasn't all that fulfilled with medicine, even though I did really like helping people, but just handing out pharmaceuticals day after day after day. Not that I'm anti-drug, because I'm not, you know. I love drugs, man. But
don't we all?
But it's just, you know, just the whole symptom relief kind of thing. And it doesn't really do anything for the underlying cause. And in fact, it almost makes it worse in a way. So I don't want anyone to suffer like I did with anxiety, because I went through, you know, 30 years of it, waking up with it every day. And became fairly successful, I must say. And just overall, it was kind of like, well, how did I do that as opposed to, you know, helping other people do that? Because I do believe traditional therapies these days are really lacking. Like medication, you know, it numbs the feelings for sure. I think talk therapy has its place, absolutely. But I'm kind of I'm not a proponent of talk therapy alone, because I don't think it really helps people. In fact, it can re-traumatize people. I think we actually need to do some somatic therapy. My wife's a somatic trauma therapist, so we get into the body, right? The body is the representation of the unconscious mind. So if you have all this unconscious crap that you've pushed down there since you've been, you know, 10, 11, 12 years old, or even younger than that, it's going to take kind of an unconscious process to get a hold of that and get into what I call get into the same room with those unconscious programs, and then you can change them. But if you're shouting at them from across the meadow, like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, or hey, you should get up at 5 every morning and do yoga, you know, like people don't internalize that stuff. So my big frustration, and I'll stop talking in a minute, is that traditional therapies just don't work. And it frustrates the hell out of me to watch people, you know, go to traditional therapists once a week for an hour for 120 odd bucks or whatever it costs these days for 5 years. And I know these people because they're my friends, and they're not a lot better, right? They're not a lot better. So I used to say this on stage. It's like, if you have a leak in your house, right? If there's a leak in your house and this plumber came by every week and got that leak just a tiny bit better every week, would you keep paying that guy $200 an hour?
No, you would not.
No, but we do that in therapy. Like, we go back to therapy time and time and time again, believing that it's going to help us. And talk therapy is helpful. Don't get me wrong. And I don't want to get, you know, into that, but you have to do some kind of somatic work, body work into the body, feeling your feelings, because you got to feel it to heal it. You can't just talk about it.
I love it. The Body Keeps the Score has been an amazing book, and it's been an amazing eye opener for me. And I don't want to hijack the conversation, because I'm sure I can see Timmy's eyes rolling and say, I know he's got a couple questions for you.
No, I'm good.
But I can honestly say I grew up. My mother has schizoaffective disorder, and my childhood was very chaotic. My dad is an alcoholic. I've talked about it on the show. Now, he's been sober now for many years. Thank goodness. He got himself clean because he was told that if he didn't, he'd be dead, which is, you know, sometimes that's the best prescription. Sometimes knowing that you're not going to be alive is a good way to clean yourself up. Yeah. But I'm really interested to know how you came to know that it was in the body, because we've talked about anxiety attacks and panic attacks on the show before. And I've actually been seen in the ER several times thinking I was having a heart attack when it was really just a panic attack.
Right.
So I'm wondering where you came, how did you come to this rationalization? Was it just many times of feeling it in your own body, or was it through your yoga training, or was this something that you just kind of pieced together as you learned more, you became more in tune to your own body?
Well, I think back in 2013, 2014, I had left medicine. I felt like my life was kind of over in a way. I was desperate. So a friend of mine who's a specialist in plant medicine said, well, why don't you try some LSD? Because, you're suicidal, you got nothing to lose. So I did. So on this LSD trip showed me that my anxiety wasn't in my head at all. It was actually in my body. It's in my solar plexus. It's a pressure, it's a pain, it's about the size of a fist. It pushes up against my heart, and it's hot. It feels prickly. So I didn't get all this in one kind of download, although as I was coming out of the LSD, I saw all this really clearly. But over the course of, kind of weeks to months after that, I kind of pieced it together, because what I was doing was I was trying to find the solution in my head all the time, when actually the solution was in my body. And here's where it gets really weird. I was also told that alarm that's in my body that pushes up against my heart is my wounded inner child, is the part of me that experienced that chaos and just stuffed it down. So I had to connect with that alarm, because when I connected that alarm, I was actually connecting with the younger, wounded, scared, and abandoned part of myself. And once I started doing that, I started making some traction. Hey, this actually is working. I'm actually feeling quite a bit better. Although, caveat to that, sometimes as you're getting better, you get worse, because the ego doesn't want you to change. So the ego keeps you overprotected and keeps you hypervigilant with stuff. So when you stop being hypervigilant, the ego goes nuts, because it thinks it's protecting you by giving you all these worries and making you kind of think all the time way too fast and way too much ahead of yourself. So the thinking was like a gradual kind of process. So to get back to your original question, I didn't see it as a neuroscientist or a medical doctor or anything like that. I saw it on LSD, and I saw that's where it was. And at that moment, I knew something was different. But about a year and a half later, I went to a conference with Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's a developmental psychologist. And he said this to me. He said, all anxiety is separation anxiety. And then everything kind of just, it all fit together. So it was like all anxiety is separation anxiety, but it's separation from yourself. Like it really is a separation from yourself. So what happened with me is when my dad would go a little crazy, and by a little crazy, I mean a lot crazy, and wind up psychiatric intensive care and all that kind of stuff, I would have to protect myself from that. And that on some level, when I was even younger, because he, wasn't like he just went crazy when I was older, I knew something was wrong. So when something goes wrong in your household as a child, you don't blame it on the parents, because the parents have to take care of you. So,
Right.
there's a saying that says, if you reject or abandon a child, they don't stop loving the parent, they stop loving themselves.
Yep.
So that's when I talk about that split. So when you get that split and become a people pleaser or whatever, when a part of you is split when you're younger like that, you can't hold love anymore. That container is cracked. So until you patch that container together to hold love for yourself again, then you start to heal. So all the talk therapy in the world is not going to change that. So that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. It's one of the reasons why my approach to anxiety is very different than I think virtually everyone on the planet right now, although that is changing. People are starting to see my views a little closer. So, we'll see. But it basically came down to LSD. LSD showed me, even with my degrees in medicine and neuroscience and my work in developmental psychology, all that academia didn't really help me. What really helped me was getting into the feeling of my body and seeing it for what it was, which LSD showed me.
I have a question for you regarding plant medicine, because I am a cannabis believer. I mean, I support legalization of cannabis, but I also support the medical as a medicine. I also support it.
Sure.
However, I also know that anything that's good can become a problem.
Of course.
Also, but what I'm wondering is, because I've actually my my acupuncturist actually suggested that I get some shrooms and have some psilocybin, and I'm just wondering if do you think that can be something that you can do as on a solo journey, or do you think that you need to seek out? I mean, again, you're in Canada, we're in the United States. You know how this works.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can literally go down the street and go to a plant medicine therapist. But I'm wondering, do you think it's safely able to be done in a solo sort of way, if you know sort of what you're working on, and you've experimented with these medicines in the past in different ways, so you know what to expect? Do you think that is something that you can actually start to work on your own?
Yes and no. So to do a large dose of, or, like a trippy dose of LSD, no, you shouldn't be on your own for that. What's becoming really popular is something called microdosing, which is you take a small amount each day for a number of days, and then you stop, and then, or some people just take it for one day, and then they stop for a week, and then they do it again. So microdosing, by and large, I think is quite safe. I don't think people get into problems with that. But I would not recommend, like a therapeutic dose of LSD, ayahuasca, any of the psychedelics on your own, because it does fracture. We can go into the neuroscience behind how the ego and how the ego is affected by psilocybin and all the there's something called the default mode network in our brain, which we kind of revert back to. And I believe it holds a lot of our shame, a lot of our repetitive stuff that we tell ourselves all the time. And what the psychedelics do is they paralyze that part. So, but they also paralyze the ego at the same time. So what happens is that you get into this sort of free state of, who you really are in a way, because all of these old, trappings and experiences you've had aren't in the mix anymore. So you get a more pure version of yourself. And when we see that more pure version of ourselves, it's kind of like once you've been there before, you can kind of get back to that in a way. So I would not recommend any of the psychedelics alone. You can make a case for doing microdosing for psilocybin. Now, the thing about that is that if you do have a first degree relative that has schizophrenia, mother, father, sister, brother, or psychotic illness, it's not a contraindication, but it's kind of a caution, right? So that would be even more reason, if you're going to do it, to make sure that you had someone with you as well. So, it's because here's the sort of the therapist kind of Dr. Russ, and then there's the Dr. Russ, and I don't want to get anybody hurt. So psilocybin you can microdose, I believe, quite safely, but with the major doses of stuff, you absolutely need a guide. You need someone with you that you can trust, because things tend to go a little haywire. They go a little weird. And just getting back to what I was saying about the default mode network, they're wondering about if this default mode that we go to in our brain when we're not doing anything, that holds a lot of our shame and stuff, the repetitive thoughts that you get.
Would that be the subconscious? Would that be comparable to the subconscious, or no?
In a way, but this is actually a structure in the brain called the default mode network. It has
okay.
Anterior cingulate and posterior. It has a bunch of structures, neural structures, that seem to hold this kind of, when the brain isn't doing something, we kind of default back into this kind of almost a daydreaming state of the brain. And they found this years ago when they were doing MRI studies. What they would do is they would give people problems, specifically math problems, and then they would watch what would happen when the math problem was over. And it would the brain would tend to go back into this default mode where it's sort of its resting, daydreaming state. But unfortunately, when we have trauma, I believe that resting, daydreaming state gets poisoned. And a lot of our shame starts coming into that. So that's why when we take psilocybin or we take psychedelics, we paralyze that default mode network, because they see that on the fMRI studies that the default mode network is no longer active. And also the ego is no longer active too. So they're kind of saying, well, maybe the ego and the default mode network are kind of really linked together. So, and I think that's one of the issues. So I think it's more subconscious is kind of a general term for not being aware of it. I think this actually, it's almost like a light switch. You can turn it on or off with psychedelics. And because it turns off the ego, as well as this sort of, constant judgment, shame, blame, whatever in you, you kind of get above the clouds and see, who you really are on some levels. But I don't want to paint, a rosy picture of it, because my trips on ayahuasca were the most terrifying of my entire life by a lot. Like,
yeah, I can imagine.
To it. So it's a complex field for sure, but it's very interesting to see these new developments that they're making. So the short answer to your question, no, I don't recommend doing psychedelics on your own, and unless you're going to consider microdosing. And then if you're considering microdosing and you have a history of schizophrenia or in a relative or whatever, you have to be extra cautious about that. So that would be a very long answer to a very specific question. So thank you very much.
No, that's good.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. I got to just say this real quick, that I really appreciate, I just appreciate you coming on, but being somebody with your credentials to be able to talk openly about this stuff, I think is such a huge and great thing, because, whether or not people are for it or not, I think just needs to be talked about. You know what I mean? There's not just one specific, antidote to something. There's lots of other variables to it.
I agree 100%.
Now, I have a question for you regarding anxiety in general, because like I said, you said your PowerPoint was a little bit old, but I'm curious to know that is our anxiety, because anxiety is rooted in the future. Is it because we have anxiety because we're always replaying the past? Is that
kind of, yeah. So I'll give you it in kind of story form. Say there's a child 7 years old and their life is going okay, and then all of a sudden their mother dies, right? So they get this trauma that gets imprinted into their system, and they don't know how to deal with it. So what the child does, if the other parent is very attuned to them and attached and connected, they can kind of work through that trauma at the time. But typically what happens with kids, especially these days when the parents are so distracted with other things, is this trauma gets stuffed down into the body. So it's almost like my mind can't handle this, so I'm going to stuff this down somewhere else, and it gets put into the body. And from that point on, it forms this focus of alarm. And I said earlier with me, this is in my solar plexus. It pushes up against my heart. It's about the size of a fist. So that's I don't even like the term anxiety, because I don't think it describes anything. Really, what you're suffering from is alarm. So, and even when people come in and talk to me, when someone says they have generalized anxiety disorder, it's like, well, let's just change the words a little bit. Let's call that generalized alarm disorder, because that's really what you have. Anxiety to me, and I write this in the book, is anxiety to me is painless. Anxiety is just thoughts. It's just anxious, future-based, scary thoughts. And one of the examples I give is, say I have two 15-year-olds in my office. One's a boy, one's a girl. I go into the girl and I say, hey, Jessica, it looks like you might be pregnant. Now, Jessica, probably at 15 years old, being pregnant, will freak out, right? Now, and she'll go into alarm, and then her mind will create a bunch of anxiety. Now, if I go into the other room and I go, hey, Jack, looks like you might be pregnant, he's not going to get anxious or alarmed at all, because he doesn't believe what I've just told him. So if you don't believe the worries, the anxious thoughts are just anxious thoughts. It's up to you. Once you believe them, then they get transferred into your body. Then the whole cycle starts. So I believe we have alarm stored in our body. It creates this negative energy. The mind is a make sense, meaning-making machine. It compulsively reads the body. It reads the alarm. The alarm is uncomfortable, so the mind, to overcome this dissonance, this incongruousness, or this fact that things don't fit together, it goes, well, I feel this horrible feeling in my body. What's the worst thing that could happen to me right now? So then it develops worries. And then when we believe the worries, we go back, it makes more alarm, which of course,
Yeah.
and then we go back into this, what I call, and I talk about this a lot in the book, this alarm anxiety cycle. So a lot of times when people are anxious, they're really alarmed. It's in their body, and they attribute it to their mind. And then a lot of therapists attribute it to their mind. They try and treat the mind, and the problem isn't in the mind. The problem is stuff down in the body. So no wonder talk therapy isn't going to work. Like if you're, I'm sort of putting my hand on my chest right now. So if your problem is here, and then I'm putting my hand on my head, and you're trying to address up here in your head, you're not really going to get that far. So it's really understanding the alarm anxiety cycle. I get people, when I deal with them, to not even use the word anxiety unless they're talking only about anxious thoughts. I get them to say, I'm feeling alarmed today. Not I'm feeling anxious, not I have anxiety. I have alarm, because that words have consciousness to them. And that word alarm, not everyone knows what anxiety means, but everyone knows what alarm means.
Well, yeah, I like your any exit.
Yeah.
Would be a good way to describe anxiety, because people have asked, like, what's your depression like, or what's this like, and you kind of talk about the emotions you feel, and you may even talk about the body mechanisms that you feel.
Right.
And I know that, like, for me, like when I get super depressed, it's hard for me to function. It's hard for me to put like more than one thought together at a time. It's also hard to perform activities. My thoughts slow down. My reaction time slows down.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you.
Go ahead, Tim.
You were talking about the anxiety and the thoughts and like the physiological. Do you think that the feeling in the body is before the thoughts, or do the thoughts come and then the feeling in the body?
I think both. If I had, if you had a gun to my head and you said, which one is it? I would say it's the body first. I would say it's the feeling first, and the thought comes second.
No kidding.
Yeah. And we're starting to see like studies now where they're looking at, people are sort of sitting around, and then all of a sudden somebody thinks, oh, I want to get a glass of water. And I'm paraphrasing this. I'm probably butchering it, but they will see on functional MRI studies activity 90 seconds before they even had the idea to go get a glass of water. So it's like things happen, and we believe, oh, okay, well, I just had the thought that I need a glass of water. Well, your brain might have processed that 60 to 90 seconds ago, and it's just coming to you now. So I believe the mind is much more of a passive object and sort of a make sense machine and a future predictor, a prediction machine than it is an actual, that it actually houses painful memories. Now, there's no doubt that, if someone has a lot of alarm in their system, their amygdala gets bigger, the hippocampus can get smaller, there's brain changes. But I do think that it starts in this sort of unconscious process where, as a child, we start pushing our trauma down so that we don't have to deal with it all the time. But then it comes up later. And then you go to see a medical doctor or whatever, they understand none of this. So you wind up getting a medication. And, and I'm not against medical doctors. I am one. I think that we have a lot of great things that we do for people. But we're not, in general, very good at mental health. We're just
in the Western world, like in the United States, and I've heard this said before, and I've said it before on our show, medicine in America is great for trauma, like gunshots, serious physical injury, but it is not good for dealing with the individual on this different level.
I think that's true. But I do think allopathic medicine does get maligned a little too much, because there are good medications out there. There really are. There's some good heart medications. There's some good. There's medications that are good. So it's kind of it's sort of a pat statement. Like if you get in a car accident, yeah, there's nothing better than allopathic medicine. Now, a chronic disease, yes, we're probably not that good at it. But in general, there's a lot of stuff in medicine that is really, really good. There's a lot of stuff that chiropractors do that's really good. There's a lot of stuff that naturopaths do that is really good as well. So it's like this sort of black and white, all or nothing kind of thought process. I really try and avoid that kind of stuff because, there's really good parts about allopathic medicine. There's really bad parts about it too. There's really good parts about, naturopaths, and there's probably some bad parts about them as well. So I try and as you can tell, I try and draw from as many different resources as I can and try to come up with something that makes sense to me.
That's awesome. Makes me feel kind of good because I do the same thing.
A lot of people, I think it's an easy explanation because I think we are looking for ways. We are frustrated with medical doctors. There's no two ways about it. We are symptom relief people. And then they say, on Facebook, they'll say, why don't doctors recommend, vitamins and all these healthy supplements? Because you won't fucking take them. That's why. We don't waste our time, like we know, you got to lose weight. If I tell you you got to lose weight as a doctor, it's like, yeah, it may hold a little. I used to put it on prescription pads sometimes, actually. Take a vacation was one of the prescriptions I used to write to people. Take a vacation, and I would give them, because whatever's written on a prescription is, of course, God at that point too. So, I'm not into doctor bashing. I know there's a lot of stuff wrong with just symptom management, but the other thing too is that patients want to feel better. They do want to feel better, and they don't want to do, a 6-week, cut out dairy, cut out gluten, cut out sugar. They don't want to do that. If you say, okay, well, I'll give you this pill that you could take every day, and your stomach pain would go away, and you don't have to do all this other stuff. They would do it. One of my favorite stories is one of the guys I used to tour with as a comedian. He used to smoke, and what smoking does is it relaxes the stomach, the top part of the stomach, so the acid starts to wash up into the esophagus. So I prescribed him this thing called Nexium, which is basically a strong acid blocker for your stomach, and it worked. At the end of the tour, he was like, I've got no heartburn anymore. This is amazing. And then when we got back home, he says, I need you to prescribe me some of that stuff. It's like, okay, well, let me get this straight. So you want me to give you a drug so you can keep smoking?
That sounds right. You summed up humans in one sentence right there.
Well, they want what they want when they want it. So people bash doctors, but we're kind of in a way just giving you what you're demanding, which is immediate symptom relief. Right? So we have to look at the big picture of, and doctors want to help. Like that's the thing. They want to help. So sometimes in giving an antidepressant, we think we're helping. And in some cases we are. But it is one of those things where we are trained in a pharmaceutical model, and, don't go to the hardware store looking for peanut butter because you're not going to find it there. Right?
I love it.
If you go to a medical doctor looking for psychotherapy, who's not a psychiatrist, and even the psychiatrists, I don't know, are doing a lot of therapy anymore. But, you're probably not going to get therapy because we're not trained in it, for one.
So you talk a lot about the somatic part of this. So what is an actionable piece of advice for our listeners and us to start getting in tune with our bodies? Because so many of us aren't in tune with our bodies.
Yeah. Such a great question. Well, thanks for that, because I was kind of rambling there.
So I was thinking the same thing too, Will. So I'm like, great, right on. Yeah.
Let's hit it. Okay. So there's this thing that I call find your alarm, right? So, so maybe I'll work with you for a sec if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Okay. So get comfortable in your chair. Now take a breath. Let it go. Now, tell me a trauma from your childhood. Don't pick like the freaking worst trauma of your life, but a traumatic event that bothers you.
The traumatic event that bothers me. I mean, look, being picked up at my babysitter's by my dad, telling me that my mother just had a nervous breakdown and that I'm leaving.
Okay, well, that's a big trauma, but
it is a huge trauma, but it's something that has plagued me my whole life.
Okay, so close your eyes for a second. Now scan your body from like your chin to your pubic bone, and think of like, bring that situation back to mind. Like, did you get into a car? Did he tell you, in front of the school? Like, what happened?
Knocked on the door. I was actually in my underwear with a bunch of other kids, like jumping on a bed,
Okay.
and then we literally went to where I lived, and I was told to just get some clothes and not to take anything else, and that we were going to my grandparents.
Okay. So right now, is there a place in your chest or your belly or your throat where you feel that more intense than somewhere else?
I would say somewhere between my Adam's apple and like around my like upper chest, like my breast up around here. So maybe like just slightly above my sternum, like in here somewhere.
Now, would you say that it had a temperature? Does it feel like hot or cold?
It actually feels quite warm.
Okay.
Not, I wouldn't say burning hot, but
Okay.
as we talk about it though, like I feel like the warmth, like it feels
Yeah.
hot.
And would you say that it's kind of this sort of diffuse kind of thing, or would you say it's kind of like a fist, like a ball of energy, or is it more just kind of diffuse?
It's a little bit more diffused. I don't feel the knot, but I feel it sort of like radiating like in through here.
And this is going to weird you out because no other doctor will ask you this. Is there like a color to it?
Um
There may not be.
I no, I don't when I close my
That's
eyes, I don't see a color.
Yeah, that's fine. And would you say that does it push up into your throat, or does it radiate anywhere?
It slightly pushes into my throat, but it kind of radiates into like my into my like shoulder.
Okay. And is it worse on one side than the other? Does it feel like it pushes more towards one side than the other?
No, it seems to be more centralized in the center than it does to be pushed off to one side or another.
Okay. So what I want you to do is put your hand over that area. Just put one of your hands over, yeah, just where that, and then just feel the reassurance of your own touch, your own connection to yourself. Now, in different people, this is going to be in different areas for sure. So if you just feel that warm connection to yourself, just telling yourself, I'm here for you, I've got you. Because I do believe that this is your younger self. I mean, I'm condensing a tremendous amount of material here, but I do believe that's your younger self that's kind of asking you for your attention.
I have, and not to cut you off, I have started to go back to my younger self, and like to give you a little backstory. So I was, as a kid, I was always called Billy,
Okay.
and somewhere in my 20s, I decided to change. My proper name is William, but I decided to
Yeah.
go by Will. And it wasn't even my idea to go by Will. It was someone else's idea, but I liked it, and it stuck, and I like it, and I feel comfortable in it. But I always felt that I left Billy behind
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Because the next thing I had written down here to ask you was nickname. So you went into that whole thing about Billy. So this is probably Billy right here.
Okay.
So if you need to connect with him, that's how you do it in your quieter moment. Now, for most people, when they start this process, it feels very disingenuous. It feels very odd. It's like, this doesn't feel right or whatever. But
And not to cut you off, but it's funny because as I got my hands here like this, like I feel like all this energy sort of like radiating around, like from like my back out to my front, like into this area.
yeah, because once you start paying attention to this area, you'll find, because when I first saw, my alarm, it was pretty, ill-defined. And the more I paid attention to it, the more defined it became. It became kind of like this purple crystalline structure that actually pushes up. So I've given you the short version of it. But so that's what I get people to do, is to find the alarm in their system. And that's probably their younger self. So usually what will happen is this alarm will come up in our system, and then we'll either distract, like we'll distract into shopping or internet or, you know, social media or something. And basically, if this is your younger self asking for your attention, and that's what your alarm is coming up, and that's why you're alarmed, and you go off and do something else, it feels like it got abandoned all over again. So on a daily basis, I get people, and what I recommend for you, Billy, is to connect with Billy 3 or 4 times a day, regardless of how you're feeling. So what a lot of people will do is they'll wait until they get alarmed, and then they'll go, oh, Dr. Kennedy said I should really find my inner child in this particular alarm spot. And that's helpful. But if you do it a number of times a day when you're not alarmed, you'll start building a better connection with that younger part of yourself. And then as that comes out, and as you get a little more connected to yourself, we become less judgmental of ourselves. We abandon ourselves much less. We blame ourselves much less. And probably most importantly, we shame ourselves a lot less. And then once you get to that point, you can start working with this, you know, inner child and bring them along. You know, if there's something that you like to do. And then kind of one of the things I do is, so what did Billy, I'm going to use his name. What did Billy like to do when he was a kid? Ride his bike?
Billy loved riding his bike. Billy loved Evel Knievel. Billy loved Kiss. Billy loved, like,
what about making models?
What's that? No, I was never into making models. No, I'm a musician through and through. Okay. I love music, always have. And at that point in my life, I loved Kiss. I loved my little wind-up Evel Knievel, like jump cycle. I loved Happy Days. I love the New York Yankees even, and I turned my back on the New York Yankees a long time ago.
Yeah, the old Snake River Canyon. All
yes.
right.
Oh yeah.
Knievel. Viva Knievel with Lauren. What was her name? Not Lauren.
Lauren. Yes. Viva Knievel. Yeah.
Yes.
I just read a book. Like, I just got a book. Like, my wife got me a book last year that I was reading recently.
Great daredevil, that Evel Knievel, but horrible actor.
Horrible actor, and not such a good person at either.
Okay, I'm going to take you a little bit further. Well, what was the best time in your life, or one of the best times in your life?
The birth of my child.
Okay.
Hearing myself on the radio for the first time.
Okay. Is there something that gives you like a real guttural feeling reaction of like pride, pleasure, peace, comfort?
Peace is very hard to find.
Yeah, I can get that, but that's, you know, but some sort of, or an accomplishment that you're really proud of.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a singer and stuff, and in the '90s, I was in a pretty popular band that like had the, you know, had a record out, got played on national radio. I thought I was going to be a rock star, and it crashed and burned.
Well, yeah.
But hey, you know this. You're a stand-up comedian. You know how it goes.
Well,
but I'm still.
I've got 8 guitars. I played in a band for 15 years.
And I still play, and I'm still writing music. I'm recording new music now and stuff.
So, but what I'm trying to get at is like, was there a show that you guys like just crushed? Like just
our CD release party at Bogey's.
Okay.
It was wall-to-wall people. You couldn't move. I don't even remember how good it was.
Bring that feeling into your body. Like you're either between sets or the show's over and people are like, that was just freaking amazing. We just loved it. Can you get there?
It's hard. It actually causes me a little bit of anxiety. It causes me a little bit of discomfort.
I can tell you why in a minute, but it's really important to see if you can get a hold of it, because what I want you to do is something called pendulation, which is basically going back to Billy and then creating that wonderful feeling in your mind as well, because he carries a lot of trauma, right? And that's all he's pretty much known. And that's basically where we revert to, because we groove into the most negative parts of our childhood. And then we store them unconsciously. So what I want to do is kind of break up that negative story with something really positive that you feel in your body. So you go back and forth and back and forth. And normally I would do this over 2 hours with somebody. So that's basically what I would do with you. I do different things with different people, but that's my instinct with you, is to kind of take you into this place. And then just, on a daily basis, bring that, and other great things, the birth of your child, that kind of stuff. because he's swimming in a whole lot of trauma in there and hasn't seen a whole lot of light. So what you've got to do is just bring that light into him. And it takes a while. And when you said earlier on that your anxiety comes up, it's because when we grow up in chaotic environments, it feels uncomfortable to let our guard down.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
We become hypervigilant. So when actually we feel good, and I tell this story in the book, sometimes my massage therapist, Britta, she's an amazing massage therapist. And I'll walk out of there after 90 minutes of massage and I'll have a panic attack because it wasn't safe for me to let down my guard as a child. So when I felt really, really relaxed and really, really like, oh, everything's great, that's when it comes back and smacks you again. So that's one of the reasons why people have a hard time healing, because when they start feeling good, they don't trust it because their ego has told them their whole life they have to maintain this vigilant state. So when I call it, you get worried when you're not worrying. So that's why you said your anxiety comes up when you start thinking of positive things, probably from your childhood. Probably you were always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You never know what was going to happen next, that kind of thing. So what happens is when we get that is that we don't ever allow ourselves to relax, because that's the time when we were children that we got blindsided.
Wow. There was a lot to digest right there.
Read the book slowly. Like the book is like, it's thick with a lot of this stuff. So it's just like, I get people, and some of them, because they haven't had the answer, they've been asking themselves these questions for their whole lives, and I start to answer it in the book. They want to just race through it and find the answers, but it can destabilize you. So you really have to kind of go with the book at a very kind of measured pace. And I get messages every day saying, I've stopped highlighting the book because I'm highlighting more words than I'm not, and it's just defeating the purpose of highlighting it. So that's what I love about this book, is it's 15 years of my kind of wisdom and knowledge and dealing with my own issues, and also dealing with my patients, because I tell stories in it too. That's one of the things that I really like about the book, because it's not an academic, and it's different than any other anxiety book that's ever been written. It's not even close to any. It's not a textbook. It's not a how-to in a way. It's why we feel like we do, and it's a normal reaction of the human nervous system when we're under stress for a long time to show up with this hypervigilant chronic thought pattern that makes us focus on the future. It's just how normal human beings operate, and in a way, anxiety is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Is it now? So I got a question for you, because, and Tim, I'm sorry that I kind of hijacked this a little bit.
No, that's all right.
But so that was one of the traumatic things. I almost drowned when I was 4. Like I literally so my question to you is it multiple traumas that just add like more and more layers, or do they go to different places, or are they necessarily stored in the same place? It's just that there's just more layers to it.
I think it's a lot of all of what you said there. I think in some people it does get stored in different places. I've had people where they feel deep alarm in their throat, and also from a woman who was sexually abused in her pelvis too. Like that was where her alarm was she felt in both places. So other people, I find that I'll bring them into different traumas of their lives. Like the almost, so, okay, let's just do this for a second. So that feeling of almost drowning, do you have any conscious or unconscious recollection of that?
Yes. And I just to give you a little context. So I was running down the side of a public pool. I knew I wasn't supposed to be running. I fell in, and I fell in at the dip where the pool starts to go down to the deeper level. And I can see it still as clear as day, me just going under the water, and me slowly sinking to the bottom.
Okay.
And I've actually had days where, and I've said this to my wife, and I've experienced this. There's days where I wish I was just let to go down to the bottom of the pool and not, but my mom jumped in and got me out. And, it caused a lot of chaos in my life afterwards. I was never like really allowed to go to people's houses with pools. and all that other stuff. But yeah, so yes, I can feel it, see it, but I love the water. I like to swim. Like,
Okay, let's slow down for a second. Well, so you're in the water. You feel like you're sinking to the bottom. Where do you feel that in your body?
top of my head.
Okay. So is that qualitative or quantitatively different than the feeling in your upper chest?
Yeah, it doesn't feel as intense. It just feels like, it almost feels like, and maybe it's my bald head letting out heat, but it just almost feels like the life is kind of leaving the top of my head in a way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily my life, but just the energy is like leaving out the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, that's seventh chakra kind of stuff, right? So,
Sure. Crown chakra. Yeah, absolutely.
that's what I find with people is I take them through the different traumas. Some people, it'll all get piled into the same place. And that's why I took you through that to find out if you have a different place than your throat. Other people, it will, all of their traumas seem to be, well, I'd say, go back into that situation where you were, near drowning or whatever. And do you feel that in your throat? Oh yeah. It's the same kind of feeling. It's the same kind of thing. So with you, it's different. So the answer is some people seem to sort of have a warehouse in one place and all of it gets stuck in there. And other people have like alarm centers that are in different parts of their body. So yeah, that's kind of thing. And the number of traumas that you have, it makes it harder to process. There's a procedure they use called Emdr, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, right? Have you heard of it before?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, most of the data, if you look at most of the data, it seems to be most effective for people that have had a singular trauma. Like if you had a near drowning experience at, say, after you're verbal, so after 7 years old, at 13 or 14, and you had connected parents, that kind of thing, EMDR for a specific trauma seems to help. But for complex PTSD or complex trauma, it doesn't really seem to do a whole lot. Although the EMDR people will probably want to take one of my testicles for that, but it's just
Joke's on them. You only have one.
Exactly. You know. Thinking too. So that's the thing. I think some of these strategies, tapping is another one. That kind of thing.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I
do the tapping. Yeah.
And I think it does help, and I can tell you why it helps is because basically what it does is prior to tapping, you were in a loop of alarm and anxiety. You were thinking more the anxious thought over and over and over, and it was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then what you did was you pulled yourself into sensation by tapping your face, because if you look at the map of the human brain, we have a tremendous amount of real estate in our brain for our hands and our face. So as soon as you touch your hands to your face, like sometimes what I do is I cross my hands across the midline, and then I just rub the opposite cheek with now you can't ignore that. That brings you in a sensation. And what that does is all the previous energy, when you were 100% putting energy into those negative thoughts, now only half of that energy is put towards your negative thoughts because your brain has been brought into the sensation and it's been brought into the present moment. So it makes you feel better in the short term. I do think there are probably people who get some benefit from tapping long term, but I'd say they're in the minority. I don't think tapping is one of those things that makes a huge difference for people because you're really not, we have to kind of go into the trauma, and you can't really, you're kind of touching the superficial part of it when you're doing that. And it's kind of a distraction method more than anything else. And there's a whole bunch of other things that I could talk about, but it's probably not all that relevant. So there's these processes that anything that brings you in a sensation, brings you into the moment, will take you out of that kind of future-based, lock of these, this horrible thing's going to happen, this horrible thing's going to happen. As soon as you bring yourself into the present, and that's one of the things that I tell people too, is that if you were looking for practical stuff to show people is this one little question that I ask myself in the middle of the day or the middle of the night, which is, am I safe in this moment? And just, when you wake up and it's 4 a.m. and you're freaking out because you've got, something the next day or the next week or whatever, and you ask yourself, am I safe in this moment? I know that shit's coming down the road. but am I safe right now, lying in my bed? Am I actually safe in this moment? And then showing yourself that you are. And because what a lot of people with trauma and anxiety do is they go from trauma to trauma to trauma. They never actually show themselves consciously or unconsciously that they're safe. So what'll happen is, someone has to give a talk in front of people. So they freak out for the month before they have to have that talk. The talk goes fairly well, actually. And then they have to fly to see their uncle a month later. So what they do then is they go, well, that talk went well. I'm really afraid of flying. So for the next month, they focus on the fear of flying. So they never actually, even though that 2-month period, 99.9% of it was risk-free, or at least, not worth freaking out about, their body kept them in this vigilant state. So when you say to yourself, I know things are stressful right now, but right in this moment, right now, am I safe? And then it shows your unconscious that, oh, you know what? You kind of are. But again, that goes against what I was saying earlier on about, that hypervigilance, because we feel like we have to keep this hypervigilance up. So if we acknowledge that we're safe, then it's like, oh, well, I don't know if I can be safe. And all of this is just repetition. It's just, finding your alarm is repetition, just going to it every day, 3 or 4 times a day, not for a long period of time, maybe a minute, maybe 2, and just realizing that you're safe, and doing that a number of times a day. It's kind of retraining that hypervigilant mind, because you're not a child anymore. You're not 7 years old waiting for your dad to come home drunk. You're not. But part of your amygdala in your brain, because the amygdala has no sense of time, part of your brain gets transported back to 7 years old, and you're waiting for your dad to come home. And that's the mental framework that you have at that particular moment. So A, bring yourself into the moment, and then B, ask yourself, hey, you know what? I'm going to look around right now. I'm going to look at my monitor, look at my lights. Am I safe in this moment? It's like, hell yeah, I'm safe in this moment. So if you're safe in this moment, you're safe, because all we have is the moment.
Excellent. I like that. A lot of what you're talking about, really, hits home for me. A lot of the stuff is just pretty spot on as far as the anxiety and your thoughts after it and waiting for the other shoe to drop, or however they say.
I should really write a book,
You probably should.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that book would probably sell pretty well.
I would think so.
And maybe you can go on a podcast and talk about it. That'd be pretty cool too.
Great idea. Well, let's set that up.
we can put a link, I think, maybe on the when the episode comes out. Maybe we can hook up a link somehow to the book.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to find me, it's basically the Anxiety MD. Some people call it the Anxiety Doctor, which is wrong, because there is another person called the Anxiety Doctor. But it's the Anxiety MD, and my YouTube channel, my Instagram, and all that stuff's there. And right now I'm creating these hypno meditations. So they're they have brainwave entrainment technology.
Awesome. Love that.
Backed into, I have one I'm working on right now for anxiety in general, and one that I'm working on for panic attacks. And both of those will be done within a week, because I've been working on them now for 2 weeks, and editing is just killing me right now. So I have this little sound booth in my house, and I sit in that frickin' sound booth by myself, and I work on it, and I obsess over it. Even if I hear a little click, it's like, I got to find a way to get that click out of there. And man, it's frustrating me, but I love doing it. I love the little minutia. I love crafting it together. I love thinking about how people are going to benefit from this. And, so yeah, that's
awesome.
What I'm working on right now.
You're making the world a better place, man.
I am definitely trying, man.
That's all you can do is try. We appreciate it, and that's what we're trying to do. That's why I'm glad we hooked up.
Yeah, for sure.
By trying, you're doing. That's the way I see it.
Well,
it's like the yoga thing. There is no try, just do.
That's right. It's do or do not. There is no try. Yoda.
Yeah. I don't do a yoga impression, but I do a Schwarzenegger impression, though.
Let's hear it.
Open the door. There's a bomb in there.
Awesome.
So I got to ask you a question. So as someone who's obviously had a lot of trauma in his life, and obviously being part of the National Speakers Bureau and everything, does a lot of this stuff like when you were doing comedy and stuff, did a lot of this come into your skit, into your bits and stuff, or?
You know what? Well, I one of my big disappointments in life was the fact that I did 12 years in comedy, and I was comfortable on stage. I liked it up there, but I never really talked about stuff that was really important to me. I would talk about how smart cars look like children's running shoes, or just stuff that wasn't, that was funny, and the audience would find funny, but it really wasn't stuff that resonated with me. And a lot of that was because I was still practicing as a physician at the time. And so I felt, kind of hamstringed by, I can't really say what I really want to talk about. Not that I wanted to go overly like dirty or controversial or whatever, but I really felt like I was this kind of doctor, upstanding citizen kind of guy. And I had to kind of stick with, kind of like Seinfeld bits. And I love Seinfeld for sure.
Me too. I'm a huge Seinfeld fan.
Observational humor, but there's something in me that there's frustration in me that I would have loved to have gone out and worked out on stage, but I never had the guts to do it. I had some material that was really funny, and I would do it. I would pick from it, and I would do it. But it wasn't. It wound up not being very rewarding in the end because I wasn't doing what I wasn't talking about what I really wanted to talk about, which would have been, like mental health issues, growing up with this stuff, and how we're trained in this society to sort of push down all the feelings, believing that somehow that's going to help us. And it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It just makes things worse. It makes the society worse. But anyway, I mean, I still do the odd set down here in Victoria, but, it would take a stretch to go back in there and do it full time.
Nice. Go ahead, Timmy.
No, I was I didn't know if you had something. I was gonna just today I have this a program that we use to screw around making like designs and memes, and something I wrote today just kind of fit with what you said. I wrote, we are all trying to heal in a world where we don't talk about healing.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's exactly, and the other one is that Krishnamurti quote that says, "It's no measure of good health to be profoundly adjusted to, or adjusted to a profoundly sick society."
Yes.
And that's kind of what's happening. We're like, human beings are incredibly adaptive creatures, but it comes at a price. That stuff doesn't go away.
We're finding out. Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't go away. So it's a matter of, really it's a matter of making friends with yourself. I have this little acronym that I use called JABS that I talk about it in the book, like boxing jabs.
Yeah.
And it's self, judgment, alienation or abandonment, blame and shame. Judgment, abandonment, blame and shame, jabs. Because we take those jabs at ourselves every day. It's unconscious. A lot of it is societal. A lot of
yes.
And being men too, like we're always feeling like we're in competition. We always feel like we have to prove ourselves. So we're always kind of pushing ourselves to be, kind of in a way what we're not. And I think that's one of the reasons. And the other thing is like, men have had crying conditioned out of them since we're boys. So we don't have this from a neurological perspective. Crying is one of those things that allows us to adapt, allows the brain to adapt internally to something it can't change externally. So if someone dies, you can't change that externally. Tears are one of those things that, the pain will still be there, but when you have a certain amount of tears over something, the brain somehow rejigs itself so that it doesn't, our perception of it isn't quite so bad. And I think that's why women do better long-term mentally than men do, because we just keep stuffing it down. Like Bill Burr talks about that, like stuff it down, love
Bill Burr,
pretend, stuff it down, pretend you have answers, do some man shit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where like the whole scope of Above Ground comes from. We're two guys that can talk about their shit, and it's like, we haven't really gotten any bad reception about it. I haven't heard anybody, be derogative towards our man cards, but I never really had much of a man card to begin with. So
well, there's a different. I think one of the things, and this is one of the things I wrote a piece about recently, is that I don't think men really object to other men sharing vulnerability with this proviso. If you share vulnerability as a victim, men are going to jump all over you. But if you say, hey, Will, I'm having a real hard time with my wife these days. We're talking about divorce and it's really getting to me. That's very different than, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, she wants a divorce and I don't have the money. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to split the house? Like, that brings up a guttural, unfortunately, it brings up this guttural reaction in men that we want to just sort of shut off and like push that person away and like man up, whatever, and I admit to it, it's there. But, I think it really is expressing what we need in a vulnerable, but not a victim sense. If you can say you're vulnerable, this is what I deal with. I deal with anxiety. I still have it every day. At some point, I mean, it's a million times better than it was because I know how to deal with it now. But that's different than appearing like a victim. And I think when men appear like victims, I think other men, and I think this is evolutionary. I think this is something that's in us that just sort of, we start to pull back. And I think it's, as men, if we can learn how to express our vulnerability and not having it appear weak, because that's the number one fear I think of men, is it appearing weak. If we can express a vulnerability and have it sort of, I feel that way too. Like that's, if we can do that, I think we can start moving forward on stuff. Because I'm certainly not about shaming someone either. Even if you do appear as a victim, I mean, I'm not going to shame you. I just recognize that there is something in me that kind of wells up, like, and I get this sort of negative kind of sense about it, like you don't really want to help that guy. And unfortunately, or professionally, of course, I do. But, with my friends and stuff like that, it's kind of like, I think that's, as men, I think it's really important for us to learn to how to express our challenges without appearing, like a victim. And I think if we do that, I think we'll start we'll start coming together as men, and we'll start seeing, hey, this is probably a better way to go.
I agree.
I think there's a certain, there's a lot of truth in there. I think victim is, that's a kind of a loaded word in a way.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, obviously, if you're a boy and something happens to you and you're victimized in some way, that's a whole different thing than being a grown man and being able to look at yourself in the mirror and pretending and being a victim or so yeah, but I get where you're coming from though with that, and I get that, and it's also off-putting to a lot of people because I think it's awfully hard for us in general to look at ourselves in the mirror and see weakness.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to appear weak. Hence, if they did, gyms wouldn't have 9 billion people you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't have people working out. You wouldn't have people in MMA. You wouldn't have any of this if people wanted to appear weak.
Yeah. And I haven't met anybody who suffered with anxiety who wasn't a victim. I'm a victim, like, because it physiologically makes you into a physiological victim. It's your mindset when you see it. It's like, okay, I'm being a victim right now. I'm afraid to leave my house. What's it going to take? And this is why I love Mel Robbins' book, like the 5-second rule. I don't know if you've read that, but it's just like, what you do is you just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You open the door and get out of the goddamn house.
Yeah, I call it the D.D. Ramone rule: 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's nothing more important than that call to action. Every Ramone song is that 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Well, you're a musician, so I can see how you like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
4/4 beat, man.
That's right, man. Everything is 4/4.
Yeah.
Dr. Russ, I really can't thank you enough for coming on and allowing us to have this conversation. I think I know for me it was an awesome experience, and I think it's opened up a lot of doors for people if they can hear it,
Yeah. Yeah, there's that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So some people are ready, some people aren't, and that's okay, and that's okay, and that's, that's how we That's how we do it as human beings. There's a certain amount of people that are early adopters, and then there's other people that wait for everything to be proven before they do it. And you know, I'm just glad that I finally got this freaking book, because I was talking to one of my ex-girlfriends the other day, and we're still pretty good friends, and we dated, man, back in like 2005, 2006. And I told her I published the book. She says, you know, you've been working on that book since we were together. Which is
Wow.
15 years, you know, since you've been working on that book since I remember you sitting, you know, writing that book when we were together. So
It's a long time coming.
You finally get it out there. And that was the great thing about the pandemic, is that I couldn't do anything else. I was stuck in the house. So it's like, okay, well, I might as well finish this damn book.
Yeah, congratulations. It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm really happy with how it's doing.
And can you get the book off of your website or?
Yeah, probably Amazon is the easiest way to do it right now. It's still pretty early. Like, we're 3 months in. I've got like 20 left. I started with 100.
Okay.
I have 20 left now. So probably Amazon is probably the best place and the fastest place to get it, and that kind of thing too. Yeah, you just type in Anxiety RX or Russell Kennedy, and you'll find it. You'll find it there. It's pretty easy to find.
You can get it in a Kindle version and a paperback version.
Yeah, and I'm making the audiobook right now. Actually,
Ooh,
yeah, we love audiobooks.
Okay, yeah. So I'll wait for that then.
Yeah. After I finish this, the hypno meditations that I'm doing right now. After I finish editing them, that's the next project. Is I'm starting on the audiobook. So
I will be getting that for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Timmy,
Thanks,
you know where we're going.
Yeah, we have some last minute questions for you.
Okay.
We always just kind of
like short
round out the episode with some questions. Little above ground questionnaire, if you will.
Okay.
Will, you want to start or do I start?
No, you start.
I feel like it's been a while, man. I don't know if I'm in a fog or what. But...
It's all right, Timmy. Shake it off.
All right, shake it off. Do you have a favorite or least favorite word?
Because I'm just you know, okay. Because I write, so there's so many words that I love.
It's all right. Throw a couple out there if you need to.
Well, it's kind of weird. I'd say alarm is probably my favorite word, because I think it meant so much to me to find the alarm in my body, and I use that word probably 100 times a day in my writing or my speaking. So alarm would be my favorite word, I think, even though it's kind of negative.
Gotcha. How about a least favorite?
Complacency, which isn't really, I don't know.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I would have guessed it was anxiety, but
actually, you know what? That's probably it. It probably is my least favorite word. You know, I think you're right, because I really don't think it has a whole lot of consciousness to it. So let me change my answer. I'll change my answer.
All right, so I got a lighthearted one for you.
Okay.
Dog, cat, or other?
Dog, for sure. I have two dogs, Buddha and Riley. Buddha is like a Zen master, and Riley's a freaking. So yeah, dog for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
If there was something that you could do for mental health as a whole without any kind of restraints, what would it be? Or what would you like to see happen with mental health?
I would like to see everybody get in touch with the alarm in their body, because that's where things get fixed.
There you go, folks. You heard it here.
Wow. Yeah, so don't forget to pick up Dr. Russ's book, Prescription Anxiety RX, there, to get in touch with that somatic part. Because
absolutely.
I will say this, that was eye-opening, you taking me through that exercise.
Yeah. And just keep doing it. Well, like, keep finding him in there, you know, because that's the part that has to heal. That's the part that once you solidify that part, everything else starts to just flow from there.
That's awesome,
yeah, well,
man.
Send him that check too, will you?
Yeah, yeah. I'll make sure I jump on Amazon right now and buy the book.
Send me a shirt.
Yeah, we will definitely.
Yeah,
We'll have to hook up with some addresses and get you a shirt.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I'd like to see a picture of you wearing it.
Oh, absolutely. Me wearing it.
Awesome.
Dr. Russ, thank you so much, man, for being a part of this. This is awesome.
Thanks for doing the work you're doing. It's important, especially for guys. Most of the people in this field are female. Out of the Instagram, anxiety people, probably 90% are female. So
really,
yeah, I would say that's from what I see anyway, because I try and follow as many anxiety people as I can, and the vast majority are female. And we need help. The guys need help in the world right now. We really, really do. So I'm really happy to see a couple of guys out there saying, like, this is what we need to do, because that's where we got to go. That's where we've got to be able to help fix the men in the world, because it's not fun out there for us.
We're trying.
Yeah.
One conversation at a time.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Hallelujah.
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 Thank you again, Dr. Russ.
You're welcome,
we appreciate it.
So until next time, be well.
Be safe.
Be
above.
Awesome. Dr. Russ, thank you so much.